As the city of Berlin crumbled under the weight of Soviet artillery during the final days of the Second World War, the final remnants of the Nazi government and hierarchy planned their last moves. Hitler died inside of his bunker, but one man who was made the Chancellor of Germany for just a matter of days was Joseph Goebbels, the Reich's Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. Goebbels was a close friend and devoted follower of Hitler, who decided, alongside his wife Magda, to not make a break for it, and their bodies were discovered inside the Reich Chancellery garden. They had taken steps in the hours before their deaths to even poison their own 6 children inside the bunker, and they believed that a life without Hitler was one which was not worth living. But in the years after their deaths, the body of Joseph Goebbels, along with that of his wife, did remain on Earth, and it was not cremated, but decades after the end of the war, the remains of Joseph Goebbels were dug up and exhumed. Welcome to the Untold Past. Today we look at the exhumation of Goebbels' body, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Joseph Goebbels, of course, is best remembered in history for being the propaganda minister and mouthpiece of Hitler's government. In the final days of the war, he remained in Berlin, having moved his family into the Fuhrerbunker complex. Specifically, they were living in the upper Fuhrerbunker. A month before the end of the war in Europe came, Goebbels and his wife Magda had presumably discussed what would happen to them and their children with the impending fate of a German defeat. Hitler, on the 22nd of April 1945, announced that he would stay inside of Berlin, and then, when the time came, end his own life. Goebbels the following day spoke to the people of Berlin, and he said in the face of Soviet encirclement in the city that, "I call on you to fight for your city. Fight with everything you have got, for the sake of your wives and your children, your mothers and your parents. Your arms are defending everything we have held ever so dear, and all the generations that will come after us. Be proud and courageous, be inventing and cunning. Your Gauleiter is amongst you. He and his colleagues will remain in your midst. His wife and children are here as well. He who once captured the city with 200 men will now use every means to galvanise the defence of the capital. The battle for Berlin must become the signal for the whole nation to rise up in battle." However, the final days of the Fuhrerbunker saw Hitler die alongside his then wife Eva Braun inside of his study, and it was Goebbels who then took part in the burning of Adolf Hitler's body inside the Reich Chancellery garden, and he gave a salute as the Führer's body was burning. But Goebbels, following the death of his close friend, grew increasingly depressed, and he realised that the end was near, and he even considered walking inside the Reich Chancellery garden until he was then blown up by a Soviet artillery shell. He claimed that, "It is a great pity that such a man, Hitler, is not with us any longer. But there is nothing to be done. For us, everything is lost now, and the only way out left for us is the one Hitler chose. I shall follow his example." He had been briefly made the Chancellor of Nazi Germany, and he did his one duty of dictating a letter to General Vasily Choykov, which was then delivered under a white flag. This letter told Choykov that Hitler had died and requested a ceasefire to be agreed. Goebbels was seen for the last time by Vice Admiral Hans-Erich Voss on the 1st of May, and he stated, "The captain must not leave his sinking ship. I have thought about it and decided to stay here. I have nowhere to go because, with little children, I will not be able to make it, especially with a leg like mine." He had made his decision to not leave the bunker complex and to attempt to break out, and it was with this that the arrangements were then made to kill his children by injecting them with morphine before cyanide ampules were crushed in their mouths. But Goebbels, alongside his wife, Magda, then left the bunker around 8:30 p.m. in the evening of the 1st of May 1945. Inside the gardens of the Reich Chancellery, the Goebbelses died. There are differing accounts as to what happened with their demises. One account claims that the pair both bit down on a cyanide capsule that Hitler had given to them close to where the remains of Hitler had been burned, and then someone, an SS officer, gave them a coup de grace gunshot to ensure their deaths. This is agreed, as Goebbels' adjutant, Gunther Schwegemann, claimed he saw the couple walk up the stairs and then he heard gunshots. but the other accounts are that Magda Goebbels took cyanide and Joseph shot himself with his pistol, and then he had SS officers fire more bullets into his body. Schweigmann was the one who allegedly ordered bullets to be fired into the Goebbels' lifeless bodies to ensure that he and Magda had died. The bodies of the Goebbelses were then covered with limited amounts of petrol, and they were partially burned, and then because the fuel ran out, they were left smouldering. The harrowing effect of this was that Joseph Goebbels and his wife's body were then found, and they were rather recognisable because of this. They were then days later discovered by the Soviets after they entered the Reich Chancellery and the surrounding area. The bodies were then taken away and they were investigated, and images show Soviet pathologists and soldiers pondering over the remains of the pair, but following this the remains were allegedly then placed inside coffins or boxes. Obviously the remains of Joseph Goebbels were in a very bad state in a way, and his body was then buried alongside the other remains discovered inside of the bunker complex and the Reich Chancellery garden inside of a forest near to the town of Rafnau in Germany. But this was not the end of the story for the body of Goebbels. 8 months later, the Soviets exhumed the body for the first time, and it was then moved to within the compound for the Soviet army garrison based in Magdeburg. The people who moved these bodies were Smersh agents, led by Lieutenant General Selenium. It was at this point that Hitler's skull was sent to Stalin, but the body of Goebbels remained underground in the Soviet complex for some time. The bodies were buried rather secretively, and it was not known who was buried close by. But then in 1970, the Soviets left the garrison in Magdeburg, and they handed it over to the East German authorities. But after the Soviet army left, the decision was then made not to rebury the body of Joseph Goebbels, his wife Magda, and the others, and to deal with them once and for all. Because of this, the authorities then ordered the bodies of Goebbels and his wife to be cremated, and they were dug up yet again 25 years after they had died, with the exhumation occurring on the 4th of April 1970. The bodies were placed on the back of a truck, and they were then driven under disguise to Schönbeck. Inside of a crematorium there, the body of Joseph Goebbels was burned, and his ashes were then hastily collected and were thrown inside of a sack, and these were then thrown in the Biederitz River. Today there is nothing that remains of the body of Joseph Goebbels on Earth, as he was exhumed a number of times before he was then finally cremated and his ashes were scattered. But what is troubling is that some high-ranking members of Hitler's government still have their remains on Earth, and Heinrich Himmler's remains and body lies deep in undergrowth on Lüneburg Heath, and also the remains of Reinhard Heydrich are still lying inside of a cemetery in Berlin. Goebbels remained inside of Hitler's bunker with the dictator until the very end, and he decided to take his life alongside his wife. The pair had arranged the murder of their own children, as they could not live in a world without Adolf Hitler, and inside of the Reich Chancellery garden, their burned bodies were discovered and were recognisable because of the lack of fuel available to dispose of their remains. The disposal of Joseph and Magda Goebbels' remains were an afterthought when compared with the burning of Hitler's body. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.